that came from the people in New York originally, I believe, and that spread to different cities in America, and then it was picked up by other photographers around the world, and it's become a worldwide project, but it goes under a variety of different names. I do the 100 Strangers, which is on Flickr. I don't know if any of you are members of Flickr, but that's a photography sharing site.
Yeah.
And the 100 Strangers project on there has rules. Some of them don't. The idea behind it is that it's a learning project as much as anything else. And the idea is to photograph 100 people who are strangers to you at the time you meet them. So basically, you walk up to somebody you don't know in the street or wherever and ask if you can take their portrait right there, right then. You cannot arrange to shoot them later because you've already met them then and they're not strangers to you. You can't chat to somebody on the internet saying and arrange to shoot them, because that's not it. It has to be when you meet them. So you might think that if you were photographing a model in a studio that you don't know, that he or she is a stranger to you. Well, they're not, because they're there to be photographed. These are people that you go up to and approach and surprise with your request to photograph them. Now, it sounds easy, but how many of you enjoy going up to people you don't know and speaking to them?
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of the things or barriers we have to get over. For some reason, I'm not changing screen. Just a sec. There we go. Right. So with the 100 Strangers on Flickr, they want you to write about your meeting as well. One of the reasons for doing that is that proves that you spoke to them and you didn't take a candid shot from a distance and just happened to get them looking at you or whatever, because the stranger doesn't have to look at the camera. But the idea is that you must talk to them. You must find out information about them. And I also share these pictures on another Flickr group, which is called The Human Family. And they require a longer piece of writing than, say, the Strangers does. But you can put the same on both. There's no problem with that at all. There are age rules. Like 100 Strangers doesn't really want people who are under 18 years old. The Human Family is quite happy with 16 being the lowest age. But both groups will allow you to photograph people who are lower than those ages with the parent's permission, or you perhaps photograph them with the parent in the picture. I mean, to be honest with you, I've got to an age now where if I see somebody on the street, I couldn't tell you if they're 16, 17, 18, 22 or 15, you know. I have no idea, particularly when they're all made up. So you have to take a bit of it on trust. And I think asking their age is something that you shouldn't be doing. So the stuff that you can write about, well, you find out the person's name. And I always say I only want your first name. It's up to them if they give me their last name. Who is she or he is pretty much what do they do in life, job-wise, things like that. And you can also promote their business on the groups. You can put a link in to their pages, which interest business people. How did you meet? Well, that's whereabouts you bumped into them or approached them. What did you talk about? That's pretty self-explanatory. And then you're supposed to write a bit in the 100 Strangers group, particularly about your photographic technique, because as I said, it's a learning process and we're there to share information with each other about problems we encounter. So it can be anything from lighting conditions, apertures used, problems you had, any kind of photography problem that you've overcome or had to overcome to get the picture. Now I take a notepad with me to write my information in, because if I photograph, say, 10 strangers in one day, I need to get the right information to the right person. Some people record the information or the interview on their phones, but then they get home and find it hasn't worked, so they haven't got the information. There is somebody else who actually has a small video camera on the hot shoe of their camera. They always say to the stranger first that I'm going to film the interview if that's okay, so then I can write the answers. And I think he also asks whether he can publish the video as well, because sometimes they're on as well. You'll find those more on YouTube. There's quite a lot on YouTube where you can follow people around and see what they do, and it's quite amusing. So also in my notepad, in the back page, I have a list of questions, just in case I forget what I want to ask. And I ask the same 2 or 3 questions to nearly all of them. I go through phases with which these questions are. And in the front of the notepad, just on the inside cover with nothing else on it, I have my name, my Flickr name, and if anybody wants to find me on Flickr, I'm English Reader, which is all one word in small letters. And they tend to photograph that onto their phone. And then I say, if you go onto Flickr and you like the picture, you'll see there's an envelope in the top right-hand corner. If you want one without my copyright on it, just email me and I'm quite happy to send them one. People give out cards as well with all that information on it. It's entirely up to you. And if you're interested in earning money at photography, it has led to some paid jobs for some people, if that's the way you want to go as well. The other thing that I would say is, well, I tend to go out quite a lot just to photograph strangers. And I go prepared, I go ready. That's what I take, nothing else. I have used different lenses, and I will use different lenses, particularly if I'm out on another photo trip somewhere and I don't want to change my lens. You can use different ones, but I like the 50mm. And before I go out, I've got that on the camera. I've got the aperture set to my preferred aperture to start with, which is 2.2. Don't ask me why I've gone for 2.2 rather than 2 or whatever. It just gives the depth of field that I like in my stranger pictures. But I will alter that, and we'll talk about that as we go. I also set the ISO on to 200 because I've been told that most digital cameras, that is their perfect ISO to work with, which makes you wonder why they've given 100 ISO if, you know. But still, this camera is extremely good with noise reduction on high ISOs, which occasionally I have to use. Shutter speed I alter at the time, you know, when you've got your stranger, because of the lighting conditions. If it's sunny, I tend to always try to move my stranger into the shade if I can, just to make life easy. I only use daylight for my pictures. Some people take flash guns or miniature lights on stands or LED lights and all kinds of stuff. And you think, I just don't want to be carrying all that gear and having to set it up, particularly in a busy town. So I just prefer to go as light as I possibly can. Occasionally I'll use a reflector, but we'll talk about that later. Do you have a break?
No, not normally.
Right, okay.
If you want to take a break at some point, by all means.
Yeah, right, because I was just about to say a lot more of the technical stuff is in the second half, but I'll just keep going, so,
Okay.
so it won't be. Right, so that's pretty much all I can say about the camera at the moment. So the next job obviously is to go and find yourself a stranger. So head into somewhere where there'll be a lot of people, and then it's very easy. There's all those people. Just pick one, walk up to them and ask them if you can photograph them right now, right there. Dead easy. So it sounds. But of course, nerves play a lot. It's like, what will they think about it? Will they tell me to get lost? Will they be rude, or what will happen? Well, in my experience, those that say no um, do so very politely. I've never had any problem at all. There's always people who don't like having the pictures taken. There's always those who are going to be too busy rushing to get somewhere and haven't got the time, even though the whole thing only lasts 5 minutes or so if you want it to. Being familiar with your camera is important, I think, because that speeds the whole process up. You don't want to be messing around with buttons, which is why I'll set it up pretty much before I approach anyone. Approaching a single person, that's easy. Approaching a couple, that's easy as well. One other couple may well encourage the person you want to photograph, and you might get to photograph the other person as well. I never photographed two together. Well, I say never, I have done two in the same photograph. To me, that is one stranger, because at the end of it, I want 100 individual photographs. I don't want 98 photographs and two of them have got two people in to get my 100. I want 100 individual pictures. Could you walk up to that group of people sat on the floor there and ask one of them? Well, I tend not to do that because the others all make silly comments and embarrass the one you're asking and things like that, and that person doesn't want to, and then one of the others volunteers that you don't particularly want to photograph. I can't tell you what makes me choose the people I choose. It's just something about them that makes me interested in photographing them. So I guess you may pick up on my style of people as we go through. I will talk about age groups and the sort of people to approach, but you soon learn as you go through it who's going to say yes. Body language plays a big part of it. If you start walking towards someone and they don't even look towards you, I won't bother. I don't approach, say, mothers pushing a pram around or with little children in tow, because they're going to be concentrating on the children more than you. Things like that. And it's important to go up and look confident, even though you're not. Go up with a smile on your face. Don't have your hands in your pockets. You've got to be confident. You can always compliment the person, particularly if they say, "Why me?" You've got to think quickly. Oh, I just love how the light's catching your hair, or something like that, or I love that piece of jewelry, or your jacket, anything. And that gets the conversation going. And then you just hopefully get them to say yes. So that's the kind of thing that I'm out to get. A simple portrait, and it's got two catchlights in her eyes, and I've never really understood where that came from. Maybe from shop windows on the other side of the street, which was sunlit. I just saw her. Well, she actually passed me. She was walking quite quickly, and I thought, oh, I just love the colours and the hat that she's wearing. So I just went and asked her. Turned out she was in town trying to buy some clothes for a funeral, of all things, and she was having a real problem because she said, I never wear black clothes and I have no idea where to go and find them. And it was her first funeral she'd ever been to, and she was really nervous about making the right impression at a funeral. And it's like, I don't think it really matters as long as you're there, to be honest with you. So we had quite a nice chat. I couldn't help her with where to go and find the clothes that she wanted, though. But if you decide to take up this project, and you've not approached strangers before or things like that, when you first start, I would suggest trying to go to places where the odds are in your favor, and go to events where people dress up, because they're there to be seen and they are so open to be being photographed. So I went to a steampunk festival and I found the only pirate that was there. There was a big queue to the cafe, and her friends were in the queue, and it was going to take them ages to get even into the cafe. So she was stood off to the side by herself. So I just asked her, because I loved her outfit. She'd made everything. She made the hat and everything herself. And I just took her over to where one of the stalls was. It's like a tent thing. So that's what the background is. It was a red tent that sells jewelry and the clothing and stuff that steampunks wear, basically. So I got that picture of her. And I noticed on the side of the cafe, it was a brick building. It had some lovely arches on it, which I thought that'd be really good to use as a background for a stranger. So I looked and thought, lovely red bricks. I need something to contrast with that colour-wise. And I glanced around, and this girl in green was walking straight towards me. It's like, oh, perfect. So I went straight up and asked her. Now, I very rarely shoot my strangers in full length. And a lot of the time that's because with a 50mm lens, I can't get far enough away to do that. And if I do, I get people walking in between me and my subject. So I would do that perhaps more with a short zoom if I'd got one of those. What I found out about this girl, her name is Debbie D, or she goes under the name of Debbie D, and you can find her on Facebook if any of you are steampunks, because she makes and sells gear. Everything in that picture she's made herself, down to the jewellery on the handbag, on her hand, every item of clothing, the wings, the goggles and everything, every little bit. And her shop is unbelievable of what she's got. She was quite happy to be photographed, and as I started to photograph her, I suddenly found I'd got 5 or 6 other photographers pointing their cameras over my shoulders. So I just walked straight up to her and said, look, please ignore all these other people. I asked you, basically, can you concentrate on my lens? Which she did. And then I walked straight up to her to do the interview and got in the way of all these other photographers. I thought, you know, tough, isn't it? You know, there's so many steampunks around here. Go find your own. You can find her in a bit. And as soon as I walked off, this poor girl disappeared under a scrum of photographers. Really strange. It's a bit like Whitby. The goths at Whitby are getting a bit fed up with photographers interrupting their weekend out. And I know the one at Lincoln that they do is they are thinking of fencing off an area of Lincoln that only the steampunks can go in, and all the photographers, you keep that side of the fence, basically. Because they have gone out for a day out, really. And at this particular steampunk thing, there must have been easily as many photographers as there were steampunks. So they're really patient, and a lot of them don't mind, but you know, if you've been interrupted all day. But the funny thing was, see, I used the arch to frame her, and I saw quite a lot of these pictures later on the internet, and everyone had done head and shoulders of her, and that was it. So hopefully my picture is a little bit different to all the rest of them. I did do some head and shoulder ones as well, but that's the one I went for because I really liked her outfit. So other places you can, the top left one here is a cosplay event. I live just outside Nottingham, so I go into Nottingham quite a lot to find my strangers, and I went especially because the cosplay event was on. You get loads of people going to visit it, all dressed up as various characters. This particular girl, she was actually working for the event, hence she's got that pass on that I should have asked her to remove. I never noticed. I suppose I can clone it out if I want to. So she was one who was telling people where to go and stuff like that. So I asked her, and in between her having to pose with all the little children that were coming, I got my pictures and my little interview. Turned out she was quite a well-known actress. I've got no idea she's in soaps or has been in soaps. I don't watch soaps, so I wouldn't have known her at all. I still don't know her. So yeah, there was her and another couple of girls showing people around. There were Daleks running around as well. Excuse me. Sorry about that. A lot of the guests come dressed up as Doctor Who, and the Daleks were happily killing them all. The Daleks' gun is actually a water pistol, so they soak them. It's quite funny seeing these Daleks, and they get stuck at the curbs, and people have to pick them up and lift them over. It's really amusing. But you get to photograph Daleks as well. And in the cosplay events, there's quite a lot of famous actresses. I think the big guest of it was somebody from Harry Potter. I've never seen a Harry Potter movie in my life or read a book, but there's a little girl in the programs, in the films or something. Does she grow up? I presume she grows up. But it was the actress who was the little girl, but at this particular time, she was in her 20s. Again, I wouldn't have recognised her. Now, the middle shot is taken at a Caribbean festival, carnival. We have one every year in Nottingham, sadly not this year. But I've worked out that if I go about an hour and a half, 2 hours before the actual carnival starts, or the parade starts, I know where they all get ready, so I go there. I don't interrupt them while they're getting ready, because they have a lot of gear to put on and get out of the cars, and they do a little practice of what they're doing. They don't like to be interrupted then, because they never think they're going to be finished on time or be dressed on time for the parade. But the parade is always late, and they always get ready about half an hour or more before the parade is due, before they have to go and line up. So they're all stood around bored twiddling their thumbs. So perfect to go and photograph them against backgrounds you want. And that's how that one was done. And then the soldier, well, in Nottingham, we have a Robin Hood character that you'll see a lot walking around the streets. He's a guide for tourists. He takes tourist groups around and points out the various places of interest. This guy was shot in Chester, and he's their version of that. That's what he does. Why he's dressed as that kind of soldier, I don't know. I don't know enough about Chester. But he was very happy to be approached and photographed. It happens to him all the time anyway. And again, once I'd photographed him against this wall, when I turned around, there must have been about 100 people with their mobile phones photographing him as well. Quite amusing. You have to forget about people watching you. You just have to get on with what you're doing. But it is a way of starting. I don't do it that often now because it's too easy. I want it to be more of a challenge. In my village, just before Christmas, we have a thing called the Turkey Trot, which was set up by the Scouts. And it was a way to raise funds for the Scouts. And the winner of the race got a turkey. And over the years, it's a half marathon. It's become big on the running calendar, and they've had to cap the number of people that they can accept. They come from all over the country and occasionally from Europe. We have 1,000 runners descend on our little tiny village. It's madness, where they park the cars and this, and they do it on a Sunday. But even there is a bus running on a Sunday, and they they have to start the race between buses, because they go, when they first start, they go on part of the bus route before they go off onto the country. So they have to get between the buses. So it's quite funny. But if I go sort of, again, an hour before the start of the race, the runners are turning up. And I have little window to photograph them. I usually only get to do 2 or 3 each year, because they have to get there, they have to go and sign in, they then join the monstrous queue for the toilet, they're then trying to warm up their muscles, because it's usually very cold. and I can interrupt one or two, but you know, it's different. They're hanging around waiting for the start. I always ask them, yeah, you get lots dressed up, as you can see with the hat, they dress up as all kinds of weird things. I always sort of ask these people, how do you think you'll do in the race? Where do you think you'll finish? And just about everyone says to me, I don't care where I finish, I just want to finish. That's all that matters. It's quite a fun thing to do. Santa's there as well, so you can photograph him as a stranger if you want, you know, all kinds of funny things. But what about the people who marshal and police events? That's somebody else, something else that you can do. Why not? I found myself in Nottingham on a Saturday. I didn't realise it was Gay Pride Day. I have never seen so many people in Nottingham at once. It was unbelievable. Crazy. The streets were packed. It was so hard to get to one of them as a stranger. You couldn't get through the crowd. You certainly couldn't find a background without other people in it, or stop people walking between you and them. So I went more into the back streets, and as it happened, two police women were walking towards me. They were the special constable type police, and I noticed this one had glitter on her face. She's got the great Gay Pride flag, and she got the Gay Pride colours on her shoulders, and I thought, why not? She can only say no. That's the worst thing they can do. And if somebody says no to you, chances are the next one is going to say yes. So that's all you have to tell yourself. Don't get disappointed. So as you can see, she said yes. If you look at her face, under her chin and in her cheeks, you can see there's a bit of yellow cast. That's the light reflecting off that fluorescent jacket. They are a nightmare. I have taken so much yellow out of that picture, because her teeth were yellow as well. Looked like she got jaundice or something. So I've cleaned them up. I could take more yellow out of the skin, but I thought I'll leave a bit because it was there. And these shots are supposed to be natural. They're not meant to be a model shoot. I asked her what her favourite part of the job was, and she said helping people. She really enjoys that she can help people and be of use. So I said to her, what's the worst part of your job? Expecting her to say some gory kind of thing. And she just said, no, the night shift. That was the bit that she really didn't enjoy. I've seen her loads of times around Nottingham now, and we always stop and have a bit of a chat. Other people working. This is a little street in Nottingham that has a few art shops on it, and she was sat on a chair in a doorway to one of these. Turned out that a lot of her artwork is sold in the shop. It's not her shop, but they sell art by lots of different artists. And she'd just come to see them, and she decided to sit in the doorway. She got a sketch pad on her knee and was just sketching people as they went by, or ideas. All the badges on her front, on her jacket, were some of the stuff she does. She makes other stuff. And again, I was able to promote her business on the Flickr group, so that helped to get her to say yes. I did not notice the tattoos until I started taking a picture of her. And I thought, wow, but I daren't ask her if she could show me the rest of them. not in the middle of the street anyway. But yeah, fantastic. Obviously what caught my eye when I saw her was the colour of her hair. But what about when you go for a restaurant or when you're on holiday? Here I found myself in Swansea, and this is the tallest building in Wales, so they told me. And it's like business offices and also homes, I think. But the very top floor is a very expensive, well, I say very expensive, not that expensive, restaurant. And you're on holiday, you think, who cares about the expenditure? We'll go out and have a meal there. And I got my camera and I just put it on the table. She was our waitress and she asked me about it. So I told her and said, I'm doing this strange project. Any chance I could photograph you? Because it wasn't that busy. And she said yes. So I tried to photograph her or by the window so you could get some impression of how high up she works, and also you could see some of the scenery out the window as well. That is Swansea and the harbour area. Out the other side of the building it looks like over the sea. At one time they got loads of photographers going up there just to take pictures, but they've now stopped that because there was too many people coming in. They say you can only come in if you're going to buy food or drinks. It's fair enough. So yeah, and another waitress saw this happening, so I got to photograph her too. So I got two strangers that particular night. This one was at Chester Zoo. They have lots of little kiosks around and a lot of students earning a bit of money, selling all kinds of stuff to the visitors. I walked past this one and saw her eyes and thought, oh, I've got to go and ask her. So I went over, had to wait for a customer to be served, asked her, and she is one of the few people who has actually heard of the 100 Strangers project before. And she's like, what, you want to photograph me for it? And I was like, yeah. And she got really excited. So then we had to wait for another customer. Then I photographed her. Then two more customers came. So they had to be served. And then I got to do my little interview with her. Ideally, she wants to be an actress and she'd love to star in a rom-com. I didn't know what that was when she told me. I had to search that out, but it's a romantic comedy. So I left the rock in because I wanted to show some kind of environment, the sort of stuff that she does, what she sells. A camera club judge would really criticize that picture for that. Bright red in the corner, it's distracting. But I wanted to keep it in to set the scene, I suppose. I also love the fact that the hairbands she's got on at the end of her plaits there are different colours. I thought that was quite a nice little oddity for the picture. Going inside, if you go around these sort of out of the centre of cities, you'll find lots of little alternative type shops and smaller shops, and they often don't have that many customers. It does make you wonder how they survive. And the people in them are sat there looking really bored because they've got nothing to do. So I went into this one because I loved her hair, and turned out she was actually the owner of the shop, and just asked her. Now the problem with working in shops is the colour of the interior lighting, the colour cast you get. Now I leave the camera on automatic white balance when I'm doing this, so the picture had a horrendous yellowy green cast from the strip lighting in there, but that was easy to get rid of in post-processing. This is one where I had to up the ISO from my 200. I think it was about 800 or maybe 1,000. But as I said, my camera is extremely good at handling noise. There's no noise reduction done at all in this. That's one of the reasons I decided to buy that camera, because of its noise capabilities. But even then, it was touch and go whether I'd get a sharp picture. Her eye that's nearest us, the right eye, is slightly out of focus. The other one's sharp. That's because of my depth of field. But we talk, like I say, I'll talk about that more later. Other people at work, you can see the one at the bottom there has got a yellowish tone to her skin. I've left it like that so you can see that's the kind of effect you can get from interior lighting. I'm in the shop with her, just shooting back to the shop front, looking out at the street, because I wanted to get the cakes in, because they told the story that she's a cake maker. Excuse me again. Oh, I don't know why I'm coughing this morning. The other one, top left, is a sort of shop that has an open front, fishmonger, and the other one is the only one that's cost me anything to do the stranger picture. I refuse to pay people, and they either want to do it or not. But this one cost me, I had to buy an ice cream. That was the rule. I thought, well, I can afford to do that. Big problem though for me, I don't like ice cream. I was like, what am I going to do with this now? But luckily I had my other half with me, and she likes ice cream, so she got an ice cream out of it. I'd have probably bought her one anyway, but so she got that, and I got my nice little portrait of her. It's up in Wales somewhere. I can't remember what place. I think if you find me on Flickr, you can go in and it'll be in this description where she was, because I put something about if any of you see her, go and tell them you've seen a picture on Flickr or something, because she always sells her ice creams in roughly the same place on this great big tricycle thing. But yeah, quite funny. One thing they did in Nottingham, and sadly it finished last time I was there, because the guy who ran it has got a different job and hasn't got the time put aside to arrange it all. But I think they do 2 a year, and they sort of focus on different types of music. So this one is the rock and alternative event, and there's about 6 or 7 venues involved, and they have more than that stages. Some of them have a stage upstairs, downstairs, and maybe one in the cellar as well. And there's bands on all these stages. The event starts at 1 o'clock, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and finishes about 1 o'clock the following morning. And there must be about 80 bands play throughout the day. And what you do is you buy a wristband, which I think costs about £20. And as long as you've got that wristband on, you can go into any venue and see any band you want. All the money from the event, and there's lots of other things going on to try and get money out of you, goes to Macmillan nurses. And they have raised absolutely incredible amount of money over the years they've been doing it for them. And it is such a shame that they're not doing it anymore. But of course, by going to these kind of events, as it's in the centre of Nottingham and they've got to travel between locations, and they're drinking or whatever else they do, they're a little bit drunk. If you go sort of say 3 o'clock when they've had a bit, they're nearly all open to being photographed. The biggest problem is you have a bit of a rush to do it in, because they're quite often hurrying to get from one venue to another to see the next band they want to see. But it's great. I ended up being offered a free wristband. Somebody's friend hadn't turned up. All sorts of stuff. Really, really good. Great day. And of course, the rock and alternative, you get so many different looking people, as in hair, colours and things like that. And these are 3 more. The guy at the top, I saw him walking towards me, and I thought, oh, just look at that beard and that hair. I've got to ask him. And turned out that he's the head, I wanted to say cook then, but I always get told off when I call them cooks, head chef at a 5-star restaurant in Boston, Lincolnshire. And talking to him, I said, have you just come for the day out to support Macmillan, or just to see the bands, or have you come to see any specific band? And he said, yes, I've come to see a band called Catchlights. That's the one that I really want to see. But most people have come to see 2 or 3 different bands, or just come for the day and to give some money, help the charity basically. So he went off, and I walked round the corner, and these 2 girls were walking towards me, and of course I was drawn by the pink hair of the one on the left. I photographed the one with dark red hair first. So when it came to interviews, I interviewed her first, and I said, have you just come for the event? And she says, well, I'm actually the lead singer in a band, one of the bands that's playing. And I'm like, oh, right. I says, which band's that then? And she goes, Catchlights. And I'm like, what chances is the photographing a major fan of the band and then the lead singer of the band straight afterwards. So I showed her the picture of the guy and says, he'll be at your show. Mention something to him or say something to him. I told her what his name was, or if you see him, you know, when you're in the bar or whatever, just have a word with him because that will make his day. I wish I could have gone to see the band myself to see if she did. I really hope she did. You sort of tell yourself that happened. Then I walked around the corner and these three were stood in a little group having a chat. And it turned out they were the three members of a band called Blue Mean Eyes. I've written that on the picture because I can never remember this band's name for some reason. They're a trio. The girl at the top is the singer and bass player. The guy on the left with the glasses on, he's the guitarist. And the guy in yellow is the drummer. And I, well, when I posted the pictures, I got a message from the girl saying they really liked the pictures. Obviously, they knew I was using graffiti, the graffiti backgrounds, but they said they really liked how I'd got yellow in every shot. The guy's jacket and the other two pictures have got yellow, and the crop is more or less the same on the people in all three. And could I send them 3 high quality copies of the pictures? And of course I did. You know, they've been good enough to help me with my project. I'm going to do that, and who knows, they might turn up on a CD or anywhere, and I really don't mind. That's a small price to pay for them helping me achieve what I want to achieve. Now, one of the problems you get, particularly when you're in busy areas, are photo bombers. You'll get them stand behind the stranger and stick their head over, or come and stand next to them or something like that. These two just ran up to me because they saw I got my camera. I wasn't actually taking a stranger at the time. He came rushing up, take my picture, you've got to take my picture, and he just wouldn't shut up about it. Now, photo bombers and things like that are, I suppose, in a way annoying, but my advice is don't ignore them, don't say no, just take the pictures. That's the fastest and easiest option, because all your cameras have got a delete button, you know, but you never know, you might get a nice picture out of it anyway. It won't be a stranger one, or that you could say something. But this guy, as soon as I took about 3 pictures, he was off. That's enough, and off dragging this girl down the road. And all the time, the girl was just apologizing to me about his behavior. Really funny. It was Gay Pride Day. You can probably tell he was gay. It was so funny. I do actually quite like the picture. I think it's quite amusing, or maybe it's an amusing memory for me. I don't like the orange bag that he had hanging off his arm for some reason. I suppose I could get rid of that if I wanted to, but it's just quite a fun image, so I kept it in the end. It also reminds me about the background that I'd love to use with The Real Stranger at one point. Other places you can go are places where people go for a day out. Because they're going to be more relaxed, they're not going to be in a rush or anything like that. They can be very open to being photographed, like say a tattoo convention. The one at the top near us at Southall, there's a massive garden centre, and every 2 years, they've got acres of land, they have a sculpture festival, and all these sort of top sculpture come in, get shipped in, and they display them all over the place. It takes hours to walk around it. And we'd gone, and I saw this girl with a friend and just went and asked her. And I said to her, you know, which sculpture do you want to be photographed by? She goes, the dragon. It's got to be the dragon. So I went over, photographed her with the dragon, and I thought that's a really good choice because I love how her skin tones and the colours of the dragon are very similar. Turned out she was a doctor. She was taking a year out to travel around Europe. So we had quite a good chat, and I also photographed her friend. Now the guy at the bottom, Obviously, I was attracted to his beard. Great. I thought that was excellent. Again, this was a problem with the 50mm because I wanted a full length shot really, but I couldn't get that because there were too many people. Because he had a leather kilt on, I'd have thought that would have been good. But this was taken at a summer festival that we have in Nottingham on the riverside. You literally get thousands and thousands of people there, so it's so hard to separate them. I don't know why I go, because I hardly ever come back with many strangers. So I used the river as the background. It was the only way to get a clean background. Having said that, I had to wait for tons of boats going up and down the river at the time. I suppose the hardest people to approach are those you just see going about their everyday lives in a city or anywhere. You don't know what they're doing. Are they in a rush or anything like that? But you still have to take the chance if you see someone you think would be great to photograph. I saw this girl walking up the road. She was with her boyfriend towards me. So I thought, wow, I just love that hair. I've got to photograph her. And of course, she then went into a shop. And it was like, oh. So I thought, well, she'll come out in a minute. And she didn't. And I looked around and I saw this red wall and I thought that'd be the perfect background for her, because some of it's in shade and some of it isn't. And her hair's got different tones of red in as well. And I was thinking, I'm sure this shop hasn't got another entrance that I can't see. And she's gone out there and I'm waiting here like an idiot. And then I was thinking, is there a restaurant in there? Have they gone for a meal? I thought, no, there isn't a restaurant in there. And about 10 minutes later, she came out and came towards me. So I asked her. Now, at the time, she was wearing huge glasses. Usually, I don't let glasses bother me. They're quite easy to get around, how to photograph them without catch lights in them. But the building facing this red wall was lit by very strong sunlight, which is what has given those catch lights in her eyes. And the reflections in her glasses were unbelievable. And I could not get them out of the glasses. So I told her the problem I was having. And she said, oh, I'll take my glasses off if you like. So she did. Gave them to her boyfriend, who started grinning. And I thought, what's going on here? So I stepped back. And then she said to me, please keep talking to me, because now I haven't got my glasses on. I am virtually blind and I can't see where you are. I don't know where to look. And I was like, what? So that was a bit different. I think she could see better than she was saying though, but it was quite amusing. So you do get lots of funny things like that. This one was just waiting to come across a pedestrian crossing controlled by traffic lights. I was on the other side, saw her. I loved how she was wearing black and white with just that little red accent of red in her hair. And I'd just passed a black background. So I just waited for her to come across the crossing. I didn't bother going across and just asked her, and she was quite happy to be photographed against my chosen background. This one, I saw her in a little market in one of the villages sort of near me, and I was struck by her red hair. So I asked her, photographed her again using one of the market stalls as the background, because it was fairly busy. And a few years later, 2 or 3 years later, I was in Nottingham and had found a faded green background that I thought would be really nice if I could find somebody with a contrasting colour. And I glanced around and I saw a girl with shortish dark hair, hat on, walking towards me, who was wearing a pink top. I thought, pink, green, great, that'll do. So I dashed across the road, went straight up to her and said, excuse me, have you heard of the 100 Strangers Project? And she went, yes, you photographed me for it already. And it was her. different hairstyle, different hair color. I had no idea it was the same person when I went up to. Just proves how a bit of color and hair and different makeup can change the looks of people. So we had quite a good laugh about that. And I never got to photograph her or anyone against the faded green background. Maybe another day. But pretty girls, if you want people to look at your pictures, unfortunately this is the way of the world, they will draw viewers in and get you likes if that's the kind of stuff you're interested in. But you know, you just approach anyone. The girl at the top right, she was one of those annoying people when you're going around towns that run up shaking a charity box in your face wanting you to sign up to 10 quid a month or something rather than give what you want to give. So I told her I didn't want to give her any money, but she could do something for me. So she asked what, and I could see she was interested, but she was a little bit nervous and she kept giggling. And she said, but I'm working, I can't. And the guy on the store with her just said to her, look, in 1 minute's time, it's your break. So off you go and have your photograph taken. So he helped me, and we did. And the girl at the bottom, that was a great find, I guess, in a way. She was walking towards me. We were near a building in Nottingham that has lots of different coloured panels. So I asked her to choose the panel to pose against. She chose the purple one, which I thought was really good because it went so nicely with the colour of her lipstick. It's the one I would have put her against, and the green top. So every time I took a picture of her, she moved. She changed her expression subtly, or her pose. I thought, you've got model training, you've got to have. And when I interviewed her, that was correct. She was in Nottingham because it's a big student town. She was here to study. But when she is not studying, she models. She's on the books of one of the top model agencies in Hong Kong. And she'd also joined the model students model agency, which is at the university. So it's great when you get somebody to move like that. But I don't really mind how people pose because it's meant to be natural for them. That's the kind of pose that we're after. Men, yeah, I photograph men. And this is where I'll quickly explain about age groups and things like that. When I'm deciding who to approach, I have learnt over time which ones are more worthwhile approaching than others, or who's more likely to say no. So the older generation are more likely to say no because they don't want to be on the evil internet, because people get their identity stolen. And this, because you only hear bad stuff about the internet on the news, don't you? You never hear the good stuff. Or their grandchildren have told them they shouldn't be on the internet, this, that, and the other. And you think, okay, so I do ask them, as you will see, but generally I don't. But to be honest, they have the best stories to tell you because they've got more life. You know, they've lived longer. There's more to tell you. So men, I do approach, not as many as I think I ought to. I don't know whether because I'm male that I feel a little more uncomfortable approaching a man. I'm not sure. I've had more men say no to me than I have female. So that might be something to do with it. I'd love to know from a female photographer doing this project if they get more yeses from men than they do from women. I just wonder along things like that. Now the younger generation, which you've perhaps noticed is what most of my images are, particularly girls. Girls, as I've hinted, are more likely to say yes than men. That might just be my approach. But the younger generation, their life is on the internet. Their life revolves around selfies and posting them all over the internet. So they're quite happy to have their pictures taken. So that's why I ask more of them than anyone else. And half the time they don't even want to see the pictures because there's that many of them all over the internet already. They're not that bothered. So I'm putting the odds in my favor by asking that age group. There is no rules in the 100 Strangers Project on how fast you do it, and you can do it in a year, you can do it in 10 years. It's entirely up to you. Again, a guy with a blue beard and blue hair. That's what made me ask him. I was going to ask him to take his hat off, but I kind of liked how the yellow clip of it matched the yellow writing on his jacket in the bottom right hand corner there. Kept that sort of link through it. Again, just a black wall to photograph him against. Not the same one I did the girl against, totally different one. You can see there's no problems with reflections in his glasses. I just lower myself or raise myself or get them to tip the head down or up or slightly to the side or something if there is a reflection. But by going in the shade, I tend not to have problems with that other than bright reflections from the other side of the street. Beards. So in your 100 Strangers project, you can set yourself little projects, little themes. Like, let's see if I can photograph 10 people with beards today. Something like that helps you look around. So that's really, really good. I've done a few. I've never found a woman with one yet, though. That's got to be on my hit list. Maybe I need to go to a circus or something for that. Yeah, really funny. Do you actually have a time that you want to finish by?
Well, we possibly about 12 o'clock-ish.
Okay. It's just how much I'll tell you about individuals.
Or a bit later, depends. I mean, what if you continue normally, what would you expect to complete by?
12:30 maybe, a bit before perhaps. The whole thing normally lasts about an hour and 3/4, something like that, because I can start rattling on. So I just won't tell you about every person, so we don't go on too long. So the guy at the bottom,
yeah, okay.
I'd come in. I go into Nottingham quite often on the bus because it's easier than parking cars and it's cheaper basically. So I got off the bus and I saw this guy in the bus station. I thought, wow, hat, glasses, beard, gotta go and ask him. Unfortunately, he was waiting for a bus that was due any minute because I really don't like the background. And I would have asked him to go to a better background, but I couldn't because of his bus coming. I also wanted to do a full-length shot of him, but I couldn't because there were so many people walking in between us because I wanted to show the length of that beard. That beard went down to his knees. Unbelievable. I've never seen anyone with a beard that long. I didn't get a chance to talk to him very much. I found a couple of things out about him because the bus turned up that he was catching and he had to hop on it. And that's, what you have to do, I guess, some getaway in a way. The guy at the top right, it turned out he was the landlord for the pub. So that's why we included the sign, because that's an advert for his pub in the write-up. I see him quite a bit now. The Sal is one of the 2 oldest pubs in Nottingham. The other one being the Old Trip to Jerusalem. I don't know if any of you have been to visit, but they're in the same sort of area. And it's amazing what you see. So, Roy, you've got your budgie. This guy's got an owl. So, centre of Nottingham, this guy sat on a bench with an owl on his shoulder. You've got to go and ask him, haven't you? You can't not. So the big problem I had with this, with using a wideish aperture, was making sure his head and the owl were in the same sort of plane of focus to get both of them sharp. Have a look at his shoulder. You can see all those little holes in his shirt from the owl's claws. I can guarantee you do not want to see the back of him. And you can work that out yourself.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So I got this great shot. Well, shot I liked anyway. And of course, as soon as you start photographing someone like that, everyone has to come and see what's going on. And they all start asking him questions. I managed to ask him a few questions before, again, he was having to pose for mobile phones and all sorts of stuff and all the different questions that were coming. So I wandered off. And I thought I'd got a shot of somebody different here. So when I posted this on Flickr, there's about 5 people from Nottingham who are doing 100 Strangers as well. All of them posted, oh, we've all photographed him as well. He's well known in the area. He wanders around the area with this owl on his shoulder. He used to have a little dog, but sadly that's died. But yeah, so he's very well known. So my kind of like something different wasn't. But I have since seen a black guy walking around Nottingham with a cockatoo on his shoulder. I've never managed to catch him up. He is one person I want to get, so I've got 2 shots of people with birds on the shoulder. Unbelievable. But once you start looking around at people and studying people and watching them, it's amazing the characters that you will see around. Like this girl, middle of the day in Nottingham, a half-dressed girl. Now, I'd found the background. I thought, I love the colour of that door. I need somebody to contrast with it. I thought green. And as I thought that, I glanced across the road and I saw a flash of green between 2 parked cars coming in my direction on the other side. So I thought, right, that's the person. So I ran across the road and I introduced the project to her before I'd really took in what she was wearing. But like, so what? So she said yes. And again, every time I took a picture, she changed her pose subtly and her expression. And I thought, again, you've got to have model training. So she said, yes, she has. So I asked her what she did as a job. Turns out she's a stripper and pole dancer. I was like, oh, great. That's different. That is certainly different. I've not read anything like that on any of the other Strangers. Then I asked her if that's what she wanted to do continuously or if she had any other goals in her working life kind of thing. And this is where I got an answer that I am sure nobody else has got yet and probably won't, maybe. She said she wants to be a worldwide known porn star. I was like, oh, what did you say to that? Well, good luck with that ambition. So yeah, that was definitely something. She then insisted I took her phone number away. So I wrote it in my book and promptly forgot about it. I thought, you know, I don't know why she wants me to have that. I don't want to know. I suppose other people, you could get things like that if you go and hang around strip joints, if there's any near you. I don't know. But definitely different. And I sure didn't expect to find somebody like that walking around just wearing that kind of outfit in the middle of the day. I've never seen anybody else walking around Nottingham like that at that time of the day yet. But you never know. So you've probably gathered that I asked people to go to backgrounds, and we'll talk about a little more about that in a minute. But I will photograph people exactly where I find them. Sometimes you have no choice. The one on the top right, she'd come to our village for the local annual show, and she did a dog display thing where they run through tubes and climb obstacle courses and that kind of stuff, an obedience kind of thing. And at the end of the day, she was just walking one of the dogs around the showground, and she was by this tree. So I just went up and asked her if she'd be a stranger for me. And she's a show person, so she's quite happy to say yes. What I love about that, though, is how the dog is looking at her and it's got its tongue out. I thought that was a nice little touch. The guy on the top left, he kind of tells one of the weird things that does happen. Now, I loved how the light was catching him as he was sat on a bench by a hedge. So I said, I'd like to photograph you exactly where you are. And he had no problem with it, apart from he didn't want to be looking at the camera. Now, I have no problem with that if that's what they don't want to do. But I did like how the light was catching him when he was looking at me. Now, I've had other strangers who said, yes, you can photograph me as long as my face isn't in the picture. Now, then I will say, I'm sorry, then I'm not going to do it, because the whole purpose of it is to take a face, a headshot or whatever, to show the face of the person anyway, show who they are. So anyway, with this guy, I just started taking pictures, and then I kept talking to him and I asked him questions. And every time he came to answer the question, he turned his head and looked at me, and I just kept taking pictures. So I got a few with him looking at me, which is what I wanted. Whether he was aware that I tricked him like that, I have no idea. But I was happy with it. The lady at the bottom was taken in Bridlington. I come up off the beach, up the steps, and saw this lady in red sat against this green background, natural background. I thought that'll make a really nice candid shot. So I raised the camera to try and take a candid shot, and she saw me. So I didn't take the shot, and I went over and introduced the project to her. And she was quite happy to be photographed. I explained it goes on the internet and all this, and she's, yes, that's no problem. On Flickr, she didn't ask what Flickr was, anything like that. So I took my picture, had a nice conversation with her, which lasted about half an hour or more as it happened. And I am convinced to this day that when I asked her if she'd help me with my 100 Strangers project, she had absolutely no idea what I was talking about, or even what the internet was. I think she was just a lonely lady sat there by herself looking out to sea, who was glad for some company. So I'm quite happy to do that and talk to them for as long as they want to. Again, I've got something for them, so let's give something back. She told me that her daughter was moving into Bridlington in the next month, so she'd be able to see her daughter a lot more. So yeah, I think she just wanted some company. So backgrounds. I suppose the question is, does the background or the stranger come first? And I can't really answer that, because if I see somebody that I want to photograph, I will ask them, regardless of whether there's a background around that I want to use or not. Sometimes I will find the background first, and then I hang around and wait for a person wearing the right colors. Now, this is why I often go to do this on my own, because if I want to hang around for an hour, I will. And if I've got somebody with me, that's a little unfair on them. Although I do quite often go out with other photographers from the camera club, and there's one in particular that I go out with quite a lot. And if we go to a town or somewhere where there's lots of people, we always have a little break from each other. We'll say, right, we're splitting up for an hour. We meet back at this shop or this whatever in an hour's time. And he always turns around to me and says, and you have got to get 3 or 4 strangers. He sets me a target, and off I go. And I have never not come back with the amount of strangers he's asked me to do. Whether I work better under pressure, I don't know, because I can go into town by myself for 3 or 4 hours and come back having photographed no one. Maybe I'm not in the mood, I don't know. Or I come back with 1, where another time I'll come back with 15. So I don't know, maybe that bit of pressure and not wanting to disappoint him or let him down by the fact I haven't done it plays a part. So this is a background that I waited at for quite a long time. This is like a pillow between 2 windows of a fast food joint. I loved how the green of it, and I thought I need somebody in red. The background isn't much wider than you can see in that picture. So I stood around waiting and waiting and waiting, and half an hour went, and it was in the winter and it was cold. And in the end, I gave up. Later, about a month later, I was back in town, and it was a much warmer day, And I thought, right, I'll go to that green background, and I waited 15 minutes. Two girls came towards me, one wearing red. So I asked her. So it always helps to kind of remember your backgrounds, or pay attention to where backgrounds are in the cities you go into or the places you go into. And sometimes they get disappointed because somebody's painted it a different color and all your plans go out the window. But still, but it's amazing how many plain backgrounds you can find in towns and cities, and they can make your shots look like they were taken in a studio. The pink background is the wall of a what do they call them? One of these places where ladies and girls go to have their nails done. So they're all sat there. So it had a nice bright pink background. And this is one where I went back another time and it's been painted grey. So it is another possibility now. The blue one is another pillar between windows, and the yellow one is the big boards they put up in towns where they're doing building work on buildings, and they put boards up around the scaffolding to stop the pedestrians walking into them and suing them. And this particular building was huge, and it had about 6 different coloured boards all the way around it, repeating the same colours. So I got lots of backgrounds to choose from there. Other places you can be lucky or not. The black one at the top, I loved this black corner. I wanted to photograph somebody wearing black with dark skin, and I went 3 or 4 times and never saw anybody that I envisioned in my background or with against that background. So in the end I just gave up and thought, right, the next person that is quite interesting in what they're wearing or their looks or whatever, I'm going to photograph. So I asked this girl who had beautiful hair, and the red top I thought would go nicely with this black background. And the next time I was in town, I went back to that background and it had been painted sky blue. So that black background is no longer there. The one at the bottom left was taken on Christmas Day in Bridlington. I've got relations there, that's why I find myself there. And I was in the harbour area. All the little stores and shops are shut. One is all blue with an orange surround. And I thought, oh, it would be great if I could find somebody in blue for this. But I thought there's hardly anybody around. It's Christmas Day, you know. And I glanced round, and as luck would have it, there was this lady walking down the harbour steps wearing blue. So I asked her, and there you go. You get more lucky the more you go out, I think. It's like any photography. You won't get lucky if you stay at home, sat on your sofa watching telly. That won't get you any pictures at all. You've got to go out, and you do get lucky. And the other one in this set, she was just photographed against a white wall in a doorway. But sometimes I will try to show more of the background to tell the story of where they are, where I've met them. And this is the kind of time when maybe I'll alter the aperture and use a smaller aperture to get more of the background in focus. The one with blue hair, she's a student, and the building behind her is part of the university, and people around here would recognize that as such. The girl on the left, she was photographed at the cosplay thing. We don't get samurai warriors wandering around Nottingham. Generally, the sword is cardboard. And the other one is a local park in Nottingham that again is part of the university or butts onto the university. I don't know where the grounds changed from being not the university to university. It's the university boating lake behind her. And as it happened, I didn't know it was an open day for the university. So there were loads of students or prospective students wandering around. Here I had actually taken a small reflector with me, and it will clip on my belt. It's one of these that pops out and you have to try and remember how on earth to fold it back up when you want to put it back in, like a little Lasterlight reflector. And she was there with her mum. So that was ideal. Mum is working the reflector for me. Some people will get the actual person you're photographing to hold the reflector just out of picture, and they're more tighter crops normally. and direct light back up. But Mum's just to the right of a reflecting light, and that's why you can see there's more than one catch light in her eyes, from the daylight and also from that, because you can see the lights coming from behind her. So it was quite easy just to bounce some light back into her face. If you use glass as a background, and of course in towns there's loads of shop fronts, just be careful that you don't appear in it, unless you want to, of course. So you have to choose your viewpoint quite a bit carefully on where you're going to take your picture. Here I tried to frame her in the sort of diamond shapes that we've got in the display in the backgrounds. Some of the problems that you might encounter that you cannot predict happening. The girl on the right hardly spoke English, but I loved her hair and I really wanted to photograph her. So a bit of sign language, pointing at the camera, and me smiling at her, and this, that, and the other. And she could understand just enough English that I got the picture done. The interview was a little bit difficult, but I got enough information out of her to write my little article that we have to do. That's assuming you're going, if you're going to do it, that you go on the 100 Strangers on Flickr. You can just do it yourself anywhere and make your own rules up about information or not. There's one guy in Nottingham who's doing it for himself. It's just called The Strangers of Nottingham, and he only asks one thing. He doesn't ask their name or anything. He just asks them to make a wish, and then he just writes the wish under the photograph, which is quite interesting. But I can't steal that idea off him because I do know him. His name is Crash Taylor if you want to look him up on the internet. The girl on the left, again, this is back to that sculpture show. And I thought I loved the deer, and I thought I'd love to photograph somebody in white next to it. And I glanced around and two ladies were walking towards me, one of whom was in white. So I went and asked, and this is where my problem came, because this particular girl is deaf. So she could hear a little, but of course when she spoke to me, like a lot of very deaf people, her speech was very slurred because she can't hear that she's not actually pronouncing things correctly. So I had a bit of a problem understanding her. She had a problem understanding me, but the other lady that was with her was her mother. She's well used to understanding her, and she kind of worked as a sort of translator, I guess. And afterwards she says to me, she's really enjoyed that. She loves the center of attention, and you know, they were very thankful that I went and provided something a little bit different and unexpected to their day for them. Now, this one, you probably have no idea about this one, because normally my talks, of course, are done in my own area. This is quite a well-known person in our area. She works for the local news, TV news channel. She doesn't read behind the desk, but she often does a lot of the reports that they feature in, and she works a lot behind the scenes. Her name is Carolyn Moses, and I happened to see her filming a news item, and I was in the park doing autumn colours. I was with a couple of other photographers, and I thought, you know, okay, fine. But as it happened, they just finished their filming and they came into the park and stood next to us, more or less, while they looked at, I don't know if you know, but TV cameras have a screen on them, and they can actually watch what they filmed there and then, so they can go and redo it if they need to. And I thought, well, she's all made up to be filmed, and she's used to being in front of a camera. She can only say no. So there she is, against my background. Now, if you look at her eyes, you will see there's been a reflector used in this one. There's the big brightest one is the reflector. It's low down, and this is the shot of me in action with one of the other photographers. So if I go out with other photographers, I will always take the reflector, because one of them is often happy to help you out and work that for you. It's an overcast day, as you can see from the sky, so it's not actually putting much light back, but if you remember in the previous picture, it does still put a nice catch light in the eye, which can make eyes come alive. It's much better to have a catch light than not, if you can. A few minutes after this, she bursted out laughing because the cameraman was pulling faces at her. I should have asked him if he'd be a stranger as well, so she could have got her own back on him, but I never thought about that. I was just more happy that I'd actually got to photograph somebody who's well known. So if you see any famous people, go and ask them. There's a brilliant one on 100 Strangers of Danny, I can't remember his last name, but it is a black guy that wears a bowler hat who's on Bargain Hunt a lot, is featured in that. And the person who photographed him, he asked her, says, "Where do you know me from?" So she had to get the answer right. Bargain Hunt, and I think he's on another antiques program. So then he was quite happy to be photographed, and she's got a really nice picture of him. So, like I said about aperture, that my choice is 2.2. I use that because I like the depth of field it gives me, but occasionally I will go even wider than that. So this is 1.4. And that means you have got such a narrow depth of field from the distance I shoot. You can step further back to increase your depth of field. And the reason I've went to that is there's a lot of fuss in the background. And by using a very wide aperture, you throw that out of focus totally. As you see, there's some colors over there on the left, there's bright blobs. They're people, so they've been thrown totally out of focus. The thing you have to remember with this is that people, when you photograph them, often sway backwards and forwards a bit, as you might do as well. And your depth of field isn't very forgiving when you do that. If you look, you can see her nose is out of focus, the tip of her nose. You will see that in my 2.2s as well. If you look around her scarf, you can see how quickly it goes off out of focus on the left-hand side. Also, her left shoulder is softer than her right shoulder. Now, this is the kind of thing that I like. And also her hair is going out of focus. I do kind of like that effect, and you will see that in a 2.2, but 1.4 is even more unforgiving that way. So I always focus on the eyelashes. And in my camera, I can move the focus points around. So I put one of them over the eye, and I use that. And that's usually enough to get the eyes in focus and the teeth, the mouth. And the rest, I'm quite happy to go a little bit soft. The camera does have eye focus on it, but I've never tried that. And I keep meaning to try that, practice on somebody I know, on my other half, if she'll sit still long enough for me, and see if it does pick up eyes if they move around, because if it does that, that will make life so much easier. Also, using wide apertures, you can throw your backgrounds, as I say, totally out of focus, and it does the bokeh, or however you pronounce that, by the effect that you get on highlights. And I do it, as you can see here, but I often wonder, are the highlights overpowering the person? Do we tend to look at those more than the person? And I think that about graffiti as well. If I use graffiti backgrounds, particularly if the color in the background is bright and the people are dressed in dull colors, does your background overpower your sitter or your subject? So that's something to think about. Having said that, I still want to do this effect with a fairground with all bright coloured lights, and I will do one day. But I still think maybe it overpowers the background. Again, that's your own personal thoughts on that. Nothing's wrong. If we like it, we like it. Also, using a wide aperture means you can get the background out of focus easily, which makes your subject stand out from it a little here. If you see the door in the background here is softer than she is, and that helps lift her out of the background. A lot of people, when you ask if you can photograph them, and you get this with models in studios as well, there's the background, they go and stand right against the background, which, as well as meaning you can get shadows on the background that you might not want, means the background is often sharp. And is that what you want? So if my stranger goes and stands right next to the door or the background, I always ask them to take a step or two forwards if there's room, and that ensures that the background then is going to go soft, and your stranger is going to really, really jump out of the picture. And it's amazing what these strangers will do for you. As I say, if you find backgrounds around the city and remember where they are, a lot of strangers are quite happy to go for a walk across town with you to your background that you think they'll look good against. It's amazing how they help you out for a photographic project. This background again is a door. It's the lower part of the door, because the top half, there's like a crossbar in the middle. There was a brass letterbox, a brass doorknob, a tannoy system, the number. There's so many things stuck on this door. The only clean area was the background. Yes, I can clone them out if I want to, but I prefer the easy option. So she said, oh, I'll sit on the floor then. So she sat on the floor. So they wriggle around on the floor for you as well. You know, don't be afraid to ask them if they mind sitting down, because once they've said yes to being photographed, they tend to want to help you out the best they can. And this kind of shows you, I quite often don't do much composing in the camera because I want the shot to be done quickly, fast, and it depends where my focus point also is set in the camera. If it's in the middle, then I keep the head in the middle, so I get her on, you know, focus on her eyes, because I've got the camera set to take the biggest file size it possibly can, and that allows me to crop. So the one on the right is the crop version. In this case, I did have to clone a bit of the door handle out because that would have appeared in the shot. The highlight on the door is again sun reflecting on a building across the road into a glossy door. So I positioned her so she was in the middle of that. The only other things that I tend to do to these is occasionally I'll take the odd spot out off a face. But as we say, the pictures need to be the stranger as they are, as you find them. So I don't do much skin smoothing or anything like that. Occasionally I'll brighten eyes up if they're in the shadow a bit. And sometimes I will select the skin or the face and the neck and just put a bit more contrast into that to brighten that up. Not too much because it can look odd, but just to lift it a little bit to make it the brightest area within the picture. And as I say, going out, taking your pictures is where you get lucky. I've seen this grey background at some steps, and I thought, oh, that would be great if I could find somebody wearing red, because I love the contrast between red and grey or red and silver. I think is a really good, powerful colour scheme, or grey. And this girl walked around the corner who had grey on. So I asked her, again, she was one that couldn't speak much English, because as I say, Nottingham is a big student place and they come from all over the world to study here. So you often get this. And I loved how one side of her head was shaven. So I made sure the hair was over the other side so we could see that. And it also showed the little earring she'd got. And this one, another door that I liked. And I glanced around and this guy was walking towards me. So I asked him. The only thing was he was nearly 7 foot tall, or it seemed like that to me. I'm not that tall. And I don't like portraits where you're looking up the person's nose. So luckily in this case, it was steps down to this door. So I asked him if he'd go down the steps a little bit, and I stayed on the pavement. So I was higher, and that put us on the same level. Hence, I didn't have to shoot looking up his nose. And the look again, saw this girl coming towards me. Whether I subconsciously looked for this, I have no idea. But I love the colours in this shot. How her glasses match her hair, and the necklace she's wearing is almost the same kind of tones, and the tattoo of the butterfly has the similar tones as well. It just works. The only strong colour really is the blue of the headscarf. Put her up against a doorway. I could clone the strut out, or the you know, the line that you can see in the background, but for this project it's not necessary. I want to show where they were when I met them, really. Having said that, I do ask them to move around a bit. Again, this is a door that's just appeared in Nottingham. It's painted to look like peeling paint. I think it's for a theatre. So I thought I need somebody with similar colours, and a girl came along and I asked her, and she couldn't do it because she was rushing for a train. And I thought, oh my goodness, what all chances of someone else wearing the same colours coming? And 5 minutes later, this girl came along, and she even had a bit of a hint of green in her blouse to go with the greens in the background. So she turned out to be better than the one that I tried to ask previously. You've probably noticed that a lot of the strangers that I do are very colourful, and I think I'm drawn to that kind of thing, bright colours, things like that. And I started thinking, you know, why haven't I done monochrome? I need to do monochrome. Now I do monochrome, I must admit, I do some, as you will see. So you have to ask yourself, what makes a good monochrome image? And one of the sort of rules behind that is the contrast. Now you can't get the color contrast. You need contrast of light against dark or dark against light to give you the contrast in a monochrome image. So here I've got that with the light skin surrounded by dark hair, and the dark hair is then surrounded by the lightness of the shop, what it's made of, the stone. So that's how I went about that one. Another reason for switching to monochrome is color casts. For some reason, the color of the daylight this day was horrendous. It was weird as anything. It was a kind of murky, yellowy brown color, and that came on the film, and I couldn't get rid of it without making other color shifts. And I could do it selectively, but I didn't want the hassle. It was a lot easier just to turn the picture black and white, and that gets rid of all color casts. So that was very easy to work on. These, the top one, the wigs are all brightly colored. So I decided to go for black and white so they didn't overpower the stranger. This was a funny one. I always wanted to use this shop, but I had to find a stranger who wasn't too tall or too low so that her head fitted in line with the wigs, the heads there. The head on the right of her, this is one of the few times I cheat in a stranger picture. That wasn't there. I just opened one of the other pictures and cloned one in because it was just a big black empty space and I just wanted a row of heads. So I added one, but generally I don't do anything like that. One on the left with the hat on, well, they both got hats the other two, haven't they? I was going to say glasses then, and they both got glasses. The one wearing the scarf, she was wearing dark colours, and in the background was the market with brightly coloured flags and things like that. So turning it black and white got rid of those so they weren't a distraction to her. The one on the left, you can see it's raining. We kept taking her glasses off and wiping them, but by the time she got them back on her face, she was covered in rain again. So why not? It's raining, so let's use it, let's do it. The background again was brightly coloured, so black and white got rid of that problem. The thing that you don't know about this shot is something that I don't tend to write in any of my write-ups, because I don't think you really need to know unless it adds to the story, is this girl is in a wheelchair. And she told me what had happened or what disease she'd got, which had pretty much made her lose the use of her legs. She was a student and she was studying medicine, and she was trying to find a cure for the disease that she got, which I thought made a good story. But it was when I asked her what she liked doing in her spare time that it was quite amazing. The auto crew on her hat might give you some idea, but she loves racing dragsters. And if she can find somebody on, say, a Rung What You Brung day or something like that, to let that will let her go in her dragster, in that dragster. She is there. They have to help her get in. She's just got enough movement to use the pedals, but a lot of dragsters are controlled by hand. So she's in them. She's off a couple of 100 miles an hour down a quarter mile or whatever, half a mile. Turned out her dad had got a variety of American cars, her favorite being a Mustang. I happened to have previously owned an American car myself, so that gave us a lot to talk about, and I was there in the rain with her for about an hour. This one, I just saw him. He was standing around having a cigarette outside a tattooist. Turned out he is a tattooist, and he was on a break. I didn't notice the tattoo on his hand until I started photographing him, and I just asked him to put the cigarette up to his mouth, so I got that in and blow some smoke out to the side for the picture. And I don't know whether any of you enter competitions, whether you are that way inclined and things like that. But at our club, we have competitions quite regularly. And I like occasionally putting one in just to see what the judge will say. And the judge saw this one. I entered it because I liked the colour of her skin, how it matched the bricks in the background and things like that. And the judge commented on that. And then the judge said, and the photographer must have known this person for a long time and have a really good rapport with them to get such a brilliant expression, such a natural smile, big smile out of this person. And I'm sat at the back thinking, I knew her for about 2 minutes. That was it. So, quite fun how you can trick judges. But generally in competitions, you don't see that many smiling images doing well. You need the more serious images. So I will ask my strangers if they'll do a more serious expression, because generally when they pose in front of the camera for you, they all smile. When you ask them to do a serious pose though, keep pressing the button, because they quite often will do it for a little bit and then burst out laughing, and you can get a really good laughing shot as long as you're pressing the shutter. So that one's done quite well in a competition world for me. But you will have noticed that coloured hair is something that has featured quite a lot in my pictures. I've become quite well known on the Flickr group for being the stranger guy who shoots people with coloured hair. We're nearly at the end now. So I saw this yellow hair coming through a crowd on a bank holiday in Nottingham. Thought, I've got to ask her. I hadn't really seen the rest of her. Then I noticed that she got yellow trousers as well. It was like brilliant colour coordination. And it wasn't until I was asking her that I really took in again the tattoos. And I chatted with her and her fiance, who was on the very opening slide. One of the little black and white pictures on the very first slide was him. And I went into town 2 or 3 times after that, stranger hunting, and bumped into them every time. And we always stopped and had a good chat. And then the last time I saw her by herself, well, she wasn't by herself, she was with her mother. She was in there buying the wedding dress. And then I haven't seen them again. And then I did this talk about a month or so ago to a club in Yorkshire, somewhere in Yorkshire. And one of the guys suddenly came online and said, I know her. Her fiance is his nephew, and he knows her. And so I managed to find out that they'd actually moved out of the area and they'd gone up to live more towards Yorkshire somewhere. And their wedding had been disrupted by COVID, but they were hoping to get married sometime around now. So hopefully it's all sorted out for them. But what chances of showing this talk to somebody, to clubs, and one of them actually being related to one of my strangers? This one I saw her sitting on a wall on a phone, and I'd seen the red background. I thought, yeah, green hair, red background, brilliant. I'll wait for her. Waited for her to finish her phone call, and then she got up. And I thought, oh no, she's going to walk away from me. I just knew, and I'll never get to her. There's so many people. But luckily, she walked directly towards me. So I asked her. She says, yes, she says, I'm just killing a bit of time. I've lost a child. And I'm like, you what? You've lost a child and you're willing to be photographed. Shouldn't you be looking for him? She says, no, I'm a social worker. I'm here with a couple of other social workers. She pointed them out. And there were a few other little children as well. She says, this particular child always runs off when we bring him to town. It's a game. He'll be back. He comes back in a couple of minutes. And sure enough, he did. So they really knew him well. I still think I'd have been a bit like worried. So her pose and expression comes from her. She sort of got her hands turned out towards me, reaching out to me a bit and going, I don't know what to do. And then she started laughing. And I've got the camera ready, so you just shoot, shoot, shoot. And you get this really natural expression. Now, the fact that she was a social worker led me to asking her. So I photographed a lot of people with coloured hair. And a lot of them work in the same sort of industry as you do. They're social workers. They work with children or drug addicts or battered women or things like this. The darker side of life, I guess, is what they work in. I said to her, do you think that you all dye your hair such bright colours to sort of bring some colour into your life from that darkness that you work with? And she thought about it a bit. She says most people in her office have got brightly coloured hair. She says, I could be right. It could just be something they do without really thinking about it. Not all people with coloured hair are in that kind of industry, though, I must add quickly. But it does make you wonder when you photograph so many that are. There's always colours to find. Nottingham is really, really good for it, the high student population. I photographed one who told me that in the town she lives in, she's about the only person with colour hair, and she sort of stands out, and people observe her as being weird or something. But come to Nottingham and she fits in and blends in perfectly. She just couldn't believe how many people they were with the different coloured hair. And I just can't help it. I have to go and ask them. And you can find them with more than one colour in their hair. This is one of the few shots that I've done in sunlight. And that's because I'd found this background and it was in shade. I looked around and there were two girls sat at an outdoor table of a cafe. They hadn't got any food or drink. So I thought, I'll go and ask them. And she said yes. And so we walked to this background, which was like 2 shops away, and the sun came out, unfortunately. Now, it made the background come alive, and it also added a lovely sheen and sparkle to her hair and really emphasized the colors. But it has thrown a shadow off her nose, which, okay, and it's given me one under her chin, across her neck, which once you've seen it, I keep looking at it, and I find that a bit annoying. It's not what I wanted, but I do like how the sun has brought that hair to life and the background. So, you know, you give and take, don't you? And I didn't have a reflector or anything like that with me to try and get rid of that. So, you know, you do what you do, but I do quite like that image. But all these people with coloured hair, I started thinking, I wonder if within my project I can shoot a little theme and get enough people with all the different colours of hair to make up a rainbow. And then I thought, why even bother when you can just shoot somebody with rainbow coloured hair? You know, brilliant. I saw this girl across the market square walking away from me. I thought, oh, there's no chance I'm going to catch her up. She went round a corner, and I thought, time I get there, she could have gone in a shop. She could have gone, oh, I have no idea. So I wrote her off. And half an hour later, walking down another street, she came walking towards me. And it was like, well, that's destiny then, isn't it? I've got to go and ask her. Of course, she said yes, as you can see. She's photographed a grey panel on a shop. And I asked her, I said, you know, so how long did it take to get your hair dyed like that? She said, 6 hours. And it was all to do with blending the different colours in, so they sort of ran into each other and things like that. 6 hours. And then you're thinking in a month, the purple bit would have grown out and a natural colour will be coming through the top there. But still fantastic. And then, maybe 2 years later, I was walking through town and I saw a girl with really long fluorescent lime green hair. I thought, I've got to go and ask her. Ran across the street. Have you heard of 100? Yes, you photographed me for it already. I had rainbow coloured hair. Well, it's like, oh, blimey. So I've done that twice now where I've not actually recognised the person. But I did find out that she liked the picture. And more importantly, her boyfriend liked the picture. So, you know, you get a bit of feedback. So I've always been told that you're supposed to end talks with a sunset, so that's the closest I can do with a stranger. This is back at the Macmillan Festival of the years I went there, and it was starting to get dark, so I thought I'm going to go home now. And I just started to cross this street, glanced up the street, and there was a shaft of sunlight coming down the road, and there were a group of people, and the girl in the middle, she was rimlet. It looked like her hair was on fire. I thought, I have got to go and ask her. I can't not. So I dived into the middle of this group of people, quickly explained to her what I wanted to do. She was up for it. Her friends were quite happy to wait. So I had to get her posed in the shaft of light. The problems I had was every time a car came down the road, that was rim lit as well and was a massive distraction off to the left. The black blobs you can see on the right, there are other people walking towards us, and when they got in the sun, they all got rim lit and became a distraction as well. So I had to time the shot to when it was right. And I exposed so that the sun wouldn't burn out too much around her hair. It has a little bit on the top of her head, but to get that effect. So that meant that her face was quite dark because I didn't have a reflector. So all I've done is in post-processing, I've just selected her face and her front and brightened that up a bit. So she wasn't like dark in there. And I got my picture. And one of the questions I asked to her was, what is her, I've forgotten the word, greatest achievement, we'll say, you know, what's she most proud of that she's achieved in life so far? And she said, matching my eyebrows to my hair. She was really pleased how she got the colours to be almost a perfect match. I hadn't even noticed her eyebrows were the same colour as her hair, but still. So that brings me to the end of that. So, you know, what is next for me? I mean, I did it as a challenge to see if I could do it, to see if I could photograph 100 people, which I have done. In fact, I have photographed 200 strangers, and I am nearly halfway through my next set of strangers because I just love it. The bug is really bitten for me. I really want to do it. I did think when I started the second 100, should I narrow it down more and perhaps do 100 couples? But I found that difficult because one person was 7 foot tall and one was 4 foot tall. So getting their heads on the same, you know, level was not easy. Or one was wearing bright colours and one was in dull colours, so one overpowered the other. I thought, should I do 100 monochrome images? But I can't. Some people restrict it where they do 100 strangers all taken in the same train station or something like that. Or in the square of the town, nowhere else. But I just see too many people around that I want to photograph, and I can't resist doing the individuals or whatever. So I thought, no, I might do little themes within the 100 strangers, like say the beards and things like that. I just do anybody. So that's what I'm doing. But I also thought about doing that. One of the reasons for doing that is I have a bit of a fear of dogs. I have been bitten by too many dogs in my working life. And the last one, which was an Alsatian, ripped my elbow up that much. I ended up in hospital. So I do have a bit of a fear of my dogs. Once I've healed, I'm not so bothered about them. I'm on friendly terms with them. But I am nervous about them. So I thought maybe I could get over this fear of of dogs by photographing 100 dogs. I've done a few, not many. I find it very difficult. I don't like the leads on them, and of course owners aren't going to let them off the leads, particularly in busy places. The other thing is I find it really hard to get the dog to actually look at me. They're looking at their owner because they think they're going to get a treat, which they usually do after they've posed for me. So I don't know whether the dogs need to be looking at me. And the other thing is I thought maybe I could photograph 100 different types of dog. I'm sure there are. I don't know. I don't know enough about them, to be honest. So that is something. And the other thing is, if I go and ask somebody who's walking a dog if I can photograph their dog, that's a perfect opportunity to ask them as well if I can photograph them for my human 100 strangers. So that is the last picture. So I'm hoping you've all enjoyed that, and that there's a lot of tips there that applies to all kinds of photography that you can perhaps use, and maybe one of you will take up the challenge, and I'll see you on the Flickr group. One club I've done this to has said they're actually sent me an email and said they're going to do it as a club project. See if they can get everybody to say photograph 5 strangers to try and get 100. So that's something you could perhaps have a go at. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I shall stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other again.
Well, Steve, thanks very much. That's absolutely wonderful. I don't think I've ever seen so many smiling faces. And normally in club photography, as you said earlier in your talk, that we don't really see very smiling faces in club photography, but I found it so enjoyable to see all the smiling faces. You know, some of the characters, some of the pictures are absolutely wonderful. So whether I'll have a go at this myself, I don't know. I am on Flickr, but I haven't put anything on Flickr for, I can't remember when. So my account may even be disabled, but I'll take a look. I think it's really great. So thanks so much for your time. Thank you.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It's an excellent project, very inspiring.
Yeah.
I think the one with
Thanks very
the
much,
hound one that you were doing, I think the 2 that you'd got in profile actually looked better than the one that you'd got face on.
Yeah. I
Certainly with them in profile, you can drop the lead down the far side so you don't get the lead in there.
Yeah, I think I've cloned the lead out on one of them as well, but I can't remember now. But yeah, when I was in Bridlington, while they were cooking, they sent me off onto the beach and said, you know, go down there for an hour and I want you to come back and photograph 10 different types of dog. I think I managed to do it actually, but it was amazing how many dog owners you know, I don't think anybody said no. And even in the humans, my success rate is 9 out of 10 will say yes. But as I say, if you get a rejection, don't worry about it because the next one's going to say yes. But it's fun. And have a look on the Flickr group because some of the stories can be quite moving. There are some sad stories. There are some amazing stories, you know, as well to read. We all like people watching, I guess, in a way, studying people. Yeah, but have a look even if you're not going to do it. It's an interesting project. Right, so.
Yeah, thank you very much. Enjoyed
Pleasure.
that.
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Steve.
Right.
So thanks, Steve, and well, we'll look forward to seeing some work from our own members here. This has a club project, 10 strangers.
Yeah.
Yeah, one each.
So,
One each.
No, they'll have to do
10
10.
each.
They'll have to do 10, but I'll probably have to give them 6 months to do it.
Yeah, but you could look at all the pictures and that would make quite a nice a day's entertainment.
I think that'll be a good project for our club to do 10 strangers.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay then.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Pleasure. Right, I
Thanks,
shall leave you
Steve.
now then. Okay.
thanks, Steve. Excellent.
Thank you.
Steve.
Bye-bye.
Okay, guys and girls, that was most enjoyable, I thought.
Different.
Yeah, different. Yes, quite different. I thought to begin with, you know, the first 10 minutes, I thought I'm going to get bored with this in a minute, seeing the same photographs over and over